Welcome to 90who10, a podcast about growing up in and around LA, Hollywood, the movie business, the music business, and everything to do with this part of town. My guest today is my co-host, Jessica Entner, and we're going to find out a little bit more about her and what it was like growing up in the 80s and 90s in LA. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm tired. I'm tired today. It's like Friday. I'm ready
Friday.
for the weekend.
Yeah. So you and I have known each other for over probably around 30 years.
Yeah.
We both went to Beverly Hills High School together, right? I was a couple years older than you, but we were pounding around back then.
92 and 94. That was our respective years.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about growing up in LA. Tell me about your mom and your dad and what it was all like before I met you.
Well, I was actually more of an LA kid because I didn't move to Beverly Hills until 8th grade, which was, all sorts of traumatic. But before that, I was in LAUSD and I lived in studios. I lived mostly in the Hollywood Hills with my parents. And then when they got divorced, we lived in Studio City.
And how old were you when your parents got divorced?
I was 3.
3.
Yeah,
okay.
when they separated.
So you don't remember them being together, really?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
So I single parent situation. So 80s. So like my mom had me on the weekdays. My dad had me on the weekends when he was in town. And my mom was from Britain, so she wasn't even American. And so she's raising an American child in a very foreign world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So your mom was from Britain. She's raising this American kid. What brought her to America from Britain? Tell me about your mom.
So my mom was the first British Miss World in 1961.
Whoa.
Which I am learning so much more about because I'm finally going through all of her letters and stuff because there's like somebody in Wales that's like writing a play about it. So I've started to deep dive into her life a bit, but she was here for 30 years. She came here when she was about 20 years old. She had it's public and it's in the books, but she had a very long-term affair with Bob Hope. And then when she met my dad, they got married in 1970 something or other, and I came out in 1976. And
so your mom was a Miss World. I'm assuming she came out to California to kind of pursue a life of movies and TV, that kind of thing.
Well, no, she knew she wasn't a great actress, but that was the goal, I think, a little bit. And honestly, I don't think my mom ever really had big aspirations for much. The more I learn, I'm like, oh. But she did. She came out here to kind of like be in the entertainment world.
Sure. And she meets your dad. And
so
tell us about your dad. Who's your dad?
So my dad, when she met him, he was in the Grassroots, which was actually a very popular 1960s band that you would know by their songs.
Give me one of their songs. I know you have a great singing voice, so give me one of their songs.
Which one do you think is the one that people know the most?
I don't know. There's a couple though that I know. But
Sooner or later, love is gonna get ya. Sooner or later, love is gonna get ya.
For sure,
it's just a matter of time. Okay, anyway, so that's the song.
Yeah.
And he left the Grassroots in the early 70s as well, like, before I was born, or around that time. Mm-hmm. And he started managing rock bands. So I actually just got the whole story recently, but he started managing Quiet Riot. And then after he was able to break Quiet Riot, they were the first metal band to ever go platinum. Mm-hmm. He became kind of this rock manager, and he managed Faith No More, Rage Against the Machine, the Deftones, Not a Surf, Failure, Burning Tree, Crystal. I mean, like all sorts of, not Bananarama. What am I saying? But Susanna Hoffs for a minute. Yeah. Like he worked. So he started just managing, and that's what he did.
That must have made for a pretty interesting childhood. I'm picturing you going to a lot of shows, people wanting tickets to shows, you hanging out with backstage. But I mean, I'm picturing this whole kind of funky lifestyle.
It was fun. I mean, it ruined me for going to concerts. I'll tell you that. It's like when you see most concerts from the side of the stage, it's like, why would I ever want to go out into out into the public audience? But it was very unorthodox. I mean, I was definitely around things that most children don't see or aren't around. Well, drugs, like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I remember going swimming at one of the guys in Quiet Riot's house, and I went to go inside to get a soda, and there's like a mirror with like lines on it, and I'm like 7, like, and I knew what it was. And then, or like, I'd go by and be like, what is it? Oh, what's that? It's sour. I mean, like, ironically, I've never done Coke. So maybe that little like experience totally made me go, ew. But yeah, it was I think there was a lot of just premature growing up because of the things that I was surrounded with. I came from divorced parents. My dad was on tour a lot with his bands. My mom really had no idea about the school systems here and how it all worked. So I had a very long leash and inconsistent childhood. That's the best way to describe it.
I would actually agree with that. Having known you in like high school, that's a perfect description. A long leash with a little bit of inconsistency and discipline there.
So I did a lot of raising of myself per se. I mean, I definitely, when we were in high school, because when you grow up, especially as an only child, pretty much, because my sister and I we share a dad, but we're 10 years apart, and so we really were raised as only children. And my mom was very volatile. I loved my mom dearly. She left us at the age of 57. She took her own life. So we'll I'm sure touch on that subject at some point. But there was a lot to unpack. There was a lot to deal with and come out of. And my dad, as wonderful as he is, because him and love him, he was there and then he was not there. So it was very difficult to have any. As a parent now, right? We're both parents. I know without the most important thing for a child, honestly, is feeling safe.
Yep.
And I didn't have that. And that, I think, kind of, by the time I got into high school, I kind of looked out for myself. Do you know what I mean? I didn't have an older brother. I didn't have an older sister. And it was all up to me to kind of do what I needed to do,
Let's deep dive a little bit more though into, your dad's this music manager. Your mom is was Miss Universe.
She was first runner-up in Miss Universe. She was Miss World. Miss
World, okay. So I'm picturing a lot of famous people around, hanging out, at nightclubs as a kid, kind of a thing. What's who are some of the famous people that were hanging around your parents?
My mom, my mother basically told me everybody that was close friends with her were this is your godmother, it was almost like auntie,
Yep.
So she was very close friends with Kiki D, who we all know from the Elton John song "Don't Go Breaking My Heart." Yvonne Elliman, who was a huge kind of disco pop star in the late 70s and 80s. If I Can't Have You, she played Mary Magdalene in Jesus Christ Superstar. She was one of my mom's best friends, so spent a lot of time, also a lot of cocaine mirrors, and
it was the 80s.
It was the 80s. So music industry, it was very much just that. It was just that time. It was discotheque. And when my parents got divorced, my mother gets a phone call from one of her really close friends who was also a Miss United Kingdom, who was dating some Greek tycoon, shipping tycoon, totally something out of a movie. And so she sent my mom and I down to Jamaica for New Year's. And I remember literally going to a discotheque, a real live discotheque. And I remember what song was playing, and it's still one of my favorite songs, but we walk in and George Benson, "Give Me the Night" was playing. And so every time I hear that song, I think of that discotheque in Jamaica. But yeah, it was my mom would take me to all the restaurants, and I was adultified, I think, in some ways,
Yep. And then when I met you, that was at Beverly Hills High School.
Yeah.
And who are some of the people that were in your year that people might know?
Oh my goodness. Well, I went to prom with Chris Landon, who is Michael Landon's son, and he's a very successful director and writer now. And who else? He was good friends with Angelina Jolie. And then in my grade, Scott Conn, who I did not get along with. But mostly just because we had very differing opinions and I was very vocal. So there's that. And then who else was in my grade.
Was Alan Mamon in your
Yes.
year too? Yeah,
No, he was a year younger. His brother was in.
Neil.
But yes, yeah, Neil. So yeah, Alan.
So Alan, who's the Alchemist, he's a Eminem's DJ and a very successful hip hop producer.
Yep. And then Mike Caron, who basically is a huge music industry.
Yeah, ran Warner Music basically.
Yep. And has artist partnership group, artist partners group. Guy O'Siri was in A Grade Above You.
Yeah.
Right. But I would go to Passover at his house.
2 grades above me.
Oh, was he really?
I think so.
So I have good Passover stories. I had Passover.
Tell me a Guy O'Siri Passover story. Let's hear it.
Oh, this is a good one. Circa, let's just say 1996, 1997. My dad and I had been going to Guy O'Siri's Passovers for like, I don't know, 3 years.
For those of you who don't know, Passover is a Jewish holiday that we have a nice big meal at. Anyway, go ahead.
It coincides with Easter. It's this, springtime celebration. Yes. So throughout I remember going to the first one that Guy ever had, and it was inside his house, and like Steven Dorff was there and some other musicians and just like some record label people. But it wasn't huge. And then it just kept growing. So the third year, I go by myself because my dad didn't feel well. And he's like, just go. And I'm like, dude, it's all celebrities. He's like, no, just go.
And that's what I'm gonna cut you off for 1 second, and I want to hear the rest of the story. But basically, that's what our podcast is about. You grow up in LA, you get invited to somebody's Passover dinner, and then Steven Dorff, Madonna are there, or whoever. That's LA for you. I mean, that's the craziest thing about it.
So we'd been going to Guy O'Siri's for a couple of years.
And for those of you who don't know, Guy O'Siri is Madonna's manager. He's president of Maverick Records, which is Madonna's record company.
Label.
Yeah. And he started out
U2.
But he started out. So we went to high school with the Demand sisters, Pilar Demand and Nisa Demand, and their father was Freddie Demand, who was Madonna's manager in the 80s. And Guy, to his credit, became friends with the Demands. He said he really wanted to work and learn the record business and kind of follow that path. Freddie helped him out, introduced him to Bernie Brillstein, who was a huge manager and producer. And Bernie, he had an office at Bernie's and a phone there. And Guy, like basically from the time he was like 18, 19, 20 years old, just started working his way, worked his tail off. Not everybody from Beverly Hills, as we've talked about in this podcast, is born with a silver spoon in their mouth or, has a multi-million-dollar trust fund. He was a guy from, for lack of a better term, the slums of Beverly Hills, which you may hear about, the south side of Beverly Hills, is middle class, LA middle class, but middle class upbringing. And this is where Guy was from. And he worked his way up and he's a huge mogul now. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
But he did. He worked his way, and so did Mike Caron. Mike Caron had been working at labels since he was 15 years old.
Right.
So, these people didn't just become like moguls overnight. This is a lifetime of dedication. So I will 100% give him like just props for that. But he started, and he's a very sociable guy. He's a very likable guy. He's a great personality. And so we had been going to the Passover dinners for a few years. The year before, it was the first year that Madonna attended. Mm-hmm. So Madonna was there. David Geffen was there. Steve Tisch is there, and me and my dad are sitting at the table with Madonna and Steve Tisch, like all of these people. Gwen Stefani's there, Steven Dorff is there, Adam Sandler's there. Just keep going. Like it was like all the Jews of Los Angeles.
I can't keep going. I wasn't there. You have to keep going. You were there.
I'm like, it's one of those. It's like you just keep going with the people in that world. So I think Rob Schneider came one year. Like it was very much like that. So my dad goes, I don't feel well. Can just go. And I'm 21 years old. And I'm like, that's really intimidating. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I'm going to show up to Guy's house. I don't work with Guy. He knows me. Yep. But, and my dad called me, no, just go. It'll be great. So Passover is actually the only Jewish holiday, but also my favorite. Mm-hmm. So I just love the storytelling of it. So I get there. And it's the who's who of Hollywood. And at one point I'm standing after the like dinner, I'm having a cigarette. This is back when like everyone chain smoked. And Anthony Kiedis was staying at Guy's house because he was in the process of getting sober. And he's smoking. He goes, you want to get out of here for a minute? And I go, okay, but like, you know me, Dan, like totally not sexual. I honestly, maybe I'm just that naive, but no, I didn't get that vibe. And so we get in the car and we're driving Mulholland. I had a gold Pathfinder. I've got Anthony Kiedis sitting shotgun, chain smoking cigarettes. And he told me, he goes, so I have some big news, but I gotta get it out, but you can't say anything. And I'm like, what? And he's like, John Frusciante is coming back to the band. I was like, what? You know, it was really like the fact that he confided that in me and I was playing him my music. And he was like digging it. It was just like one of those really LA like moments where I'm sitting there going, you know, I'm acting all cool. Like this is totally normal. Like hanging out with Anthony Kiedis. Because my dad didn't manage him. So I didn't
have this is probably the first time John came back.
Yeah, this is 96, 97. Yeah. So it's after, it's like right before Californication, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it was that album that he came back for. But it was just like this crazy, you know, moment. And then growing up, you know, aside from going to these crazy Passovers, you know, anytime you would go out in LA, especially in the early 90s and well, the whole 90s, we didn't have social media. So people were out and like, you know, Dublin's, you know what that looked like. The Opium Den, you could go on any given night. Ryan Reynolds used to hang out there. Charlize Theron used to hang out there. So you would see all these people in that kind of like culture way where you kind of knew them, but not really. Yep. So there was a lot of that, you know. Yep. And then of course, when I was in my 20s, I dated maybe one or two people that some people know. I'm not going to mention because I just still am like cringy about it.
Whoa. We're not letting you off the hook that
well, no, we'll get to that. No, I don't like that part. But you
gotta give us like a little more than that.
No, people can Google it. No, I'm kidding. It's not Googleable. I'll expose it one year.
I don't know about letting me off the hook.
No, but I dated, you know, I use the word date loosely, but again, wasn't sleeping with people. I dated somebody who's done very well for themselves. And when we dated, they were the whole time we were together was a virgin still. I dated Carson Daly, which I'm still not quite sure how I feel about that, but it was a time. Like I just found a picture of me sticking my toe up the nose of the lead singer of Smash Mouth because they were in town doing a show and they slept on Carson's floor. Yeah. But it was a time. It really was. It was a time. It was fun. Carson was great. I used to go to K-Rock and like, you know, tell him what to play. And then we'd all go down to Dalt's and get drunk. And it was, I didn't drink at the time, but he did. And it was a very, it was just fun. It was like a fun time. So between that and like going to, we'd go to Vegas a lot and then, you know, go to see shows. And it was just this kind of, if you were here for a period of time in your early 20s, everyone knew each other. It just, if you were hanging out at a certain area, you knew people. So, that was it.
Yeah, no, the 90s in LA were a great time. And like you said, there was no social media. It was all word of mouth. And, you know, there was like this same kind of group of like, I mean, it was a couple hundred people, but they were all going out to these different places 3, 4, 5 nights a week. We'd all run into each other
on Thursdays.
People would be, working actors and up and coming musicians and definitely names that went on to a lot of big success. But the 90s in LA was a really, really fun time.
It was.
Then after high school, tell me, what did you do after high school, like career-wise and stuff?
Well, considering I barely went to high school, as you remember, I was.
Nobody went to high school less than me, so.
I may have, because I was told that I almost didn't graduate. I graduated with a 1.9, and I absolutely 100% know I'm smarter than half the kids that got 4.0. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. No, it was. I didn't have the patience, and now that I know I've got a bit of the ADHD, it makes sense. Like I just could not sit in classes all day. It was very hard for me. I probably should have gone to Contin and I probably would have been fine. But I went to, I suffered from terrible panic disorder my first year in college. So 95, I went up to Santa Barbara City. I was living in a dorm room with my boyfriend, my high school boyfriend, which I do not suggest anybody do. It was fine. It was just, we were very insulated. And I then I tried mushrooms for the first time, and it was a total catalyst and disaster for. I smoked a lot of pot, but I never got into drugs. And in a weird way, I'm almost thankful that I had terrible panic disorder, because I do think it steered me away from that. I probably could have gone down a very dark path, because heroin became in vogue and I say in vogue because it kind of was. It was like all of a sudden these like rich kids were shooting up, and you're like, why? And I had a lot of friends that went down that road. So I very easily could have been peer pressured into that. And I somehow, with the panic disorder, which was debilitating, I pulled myself out of that. I auditioned to get into Tisch School of the Arts, and that was my goal. But I ended up going to the Academy of Dramatic Arts and doing, auditioning, and I got very close to a couple really awesome roles. And I just don't do well with like rejection. Like, you have to really want it to keep putting yourself in those positions. And I think I just didn't really want it, and that's okay. But I did a couple plays, and then I got into music. I started working at a company called Radio and Records, doing, no joke, data input. I would have to talk to all the DJs around the country, and they would tell me what their playlists were. So they tell me how many spins each record was getting. So I kind of got this understanding of how the radio business worked. And then I worked with at Maverick Publishing with Lionel Conway, and it's for their publishing.
So Maverick is part of Maverick Records, right?
It doesn't exist anymore, but at the time they had a publishing.
You must have some cool. Is that where you based in LA then?
Oh yeah, it was right up on Sunset.
So you must have some fun stories of working at Maverick and people coming through there.
Oh, Michelle and Dago Jello used to come in. Tom Waits would call. Lionel was best friends with Rod Stewart, so he would come in, and like it was. I remember Lionel's birthday. He turned 60 or something.
Lionel
Conway was who ran. He's a huge publishing icon.
Right.
He ran Maverick Publishing back then, and Rod Stewart comes in. He used to come in to watch the soccer, but the football, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And it was Lionel's birthday, and they got him a stripper. I mean, it was the 90s. You could smoke in the office still.
Yeah.
But like this strip in the workplace, like the stripper. And I remember like coming in, and there's like whipped cream everywhere. I'm like, what happened in here? It was, I was around all that. I got to go see bands. That was my favorite thing to do. I loved seeing live shows. I was friends with a lot of like bands that maybe didn't possibly go forward, but were really great bands at the time. And I just got really into the music scene. And then,
do you remember seeing any bands back then, like right before they popped or became huge?
Oh, I saw Maroon 5 when they were Kara's Flowers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And where was that?
They were terrible.
And where was it? What venue was it?
At the Troubadour.
Yeah.
At the Troubadour. Yeah. So he was, Kara's Flowers. Who else? I mean, I've seen a lot. That's very hard for me to say, because I've seen a lot of people. Like, I'd have to like really think about that. I became friends with a couple people that my dad was managing. Like Kelly Scott, who's the drummer in Failure, became a good friend. And I just I knew that I liked music, but one day a friend of mine was like, he heard me sing something. And then he's like, why don't we write songs? Why are you not doing this? I'm like, I don't know. Cause I've always been that person that just kind of goes where the wind takes me a little bit. I've never had really big like goals. Like, I'm not a goal setter. I'm like, what are we doing next week?
Yep.
And I did a couple songs, and all of a sudden there was some momentum. And my partner at the time, who was doing all the music and setting up like writing sessions, I wrote everything, all the melodies, all the lyrics, and I would go in the studio, bust out a song, and I had like a nice body of work. So this partner plays it for a pretty high up lawyer, entertainment lawyer. And apparently she told my dad. I hadn't told my dad that I was doing this.
What year are we talking here around?
97 through 2001. So
this is just like maybe just prior to MySpace, as it's starting to maybe catch on a little bit.
Way before.
Yeah.
Way before. Like, don't forget, Friendster was the MySpace before
Yeah,
MySpace.
yeah,
So
yeah.
this is like that was 2003 when that
Okay.
happened. So
Yep.
this is way before that. But it was when the music industry was all folding in on itself.
Yep.
So you were just getting like smaller, like all the labels were getting eaten up by bigger labels.
Yep.
And I had a couple demo deals. I had a publishing deal with Warner Chappell. Like things were moving in a really great direction.
Yep.
But and I went to Europe and I wrote for 6 weeks in London with everybody under the sun. I mean, it was a great time.
Like who? Tell me who.
Robin Miller, who produced Sade. I worked with Howie B, who did a lot of stuff with Goldie and Bjork, and he put me on the same reel as Bjork, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Who else? The Matrix, who went on to win Grammys for Liz Phair and Christina Aguilera. So it was just, a bunch of different types of writers. And then it just was there was like a standstill. Then my mom died. And so when my mom passed, I think I just lacked that motivation. It really kind of took the wind out of my sails.
Sure. Yeah.
And I did one more session. I went to Toronto. This was my favorite session. I went to Toronto for about a month and I worked with Doc McKinney, who wrote and produced the first Astero album and Reese album. And he actually worked on The Weeknd's EP before The Weeknd became The Weeknd. But like before he blew up.
That's when he was still The Weekday.
Yeah, that's when he was a Weekday. And it was like the Balloon EP. Anyway, he was amazing. I wrote him a letter. Columbia funded it. I went out there and we wrote 2 songs. G Love and Special Sauce was also writing with him. And I fell in love with Toronto. It was summertime, but it was like the most vibrant musical city, more so than Los Angeles. Like it's such a tight-knit group of people there that you'd go to a club and there'd be like a sitar player and a saxophonist and a piano man and a drummer on stage. And like people from the audience would just pop up, all different genres. And it was so inspiring to be around that. So that was my last real foray into it. And then I was going to start doing shows. And I think I just got disenchanted with everything.
Yep.
That's kind of what, where that went. But it was a fun time. I loved that I did it. I've been writing a little bit more lately. And it was good. It was, the music industry is a fickle one,
But that so you kind of got burnt out on that a little bit, and then took a little time off after your mom died, and then fell into.
Well, when I met my husband, I met my husband about 2 years roughly after my mom passed away, or a year and a half after my mom passed away. His mom had also passed away, so we had this awful thing in common.
Yep.
And she had passed away like within a year of my mom, so it was through a high school friend. I call her, she's basically curated my life in some weird way. So I owe a lot to her, but she's also how I fell into this business. So I started working in advertising and on the music side. So I would help brands and advertisers license music or create original compositions. So I started working kind of on more the business production end of it. So like project management. And curating and working with composers and creative directing what I need from them. And so I now have my own company, which I started about 2.5-3 years ago. And, things were really good. This year's been weird. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. This year's been weird. There's like 18 strikes happening right now. And but I always wanted to be in a creative space, no matter what I was doing. And I realized, I tried my hand at stand-up comedy, not to become anything other than I just wanted to do it for my own soul. So a lot of what I do is just based on, fulfilling that creative itch,
Sure. So tell us about being a music supervisor and music production and what that all entails with you, and talk to me about your AMP radio gig too.
Oh, my AMP rate. Well, that's actually giving me life right now.
Yeah.
I started doing, it's funny. Instagram clearly knows who they're marketing to because I kept getting this like ad in my feed. I'm like, what the hell is this? And so I click on it and I go, oh my God, AMP, what is this? You can you can just have your own radio show and play music and talk to nobody. Amazing. So I started doing it, and strangely, I started getting some followers, and people are now showing up in my shows, and I have like 40 people at a time coming in and through. And I play all sorts of music. I have a big stress on like new discoveries. There's a lot of really good music being made right now.
I just got into somebody that maybe you know of. Hold on a second. I'm going to ask you right now. Hold on a second. Have you heard of Jason Isbell?
No.
And the 400 unit?
No. I will write that down.
Check him out. He's got a song that I really like. It's called If We Were Vampires.
Okay. I'm currently obsessed with Burhana, the song California. I'll send it to you. I play it like 8 times a day. No joke.
Check out Jason Isbell. He's really good.
I will.
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole music supervision thing, I kind of fell into it. As I said, I fall into most things in my life, like acting and singing and music industry stuff. So that's kind of.
So how would you say? So I mean, we've covered a lot here, and but I really kind of want to tie it back into the theme of our show and 90who10 and kind of the whole thing about like our show is like. I grew up in Beverly Hills. We both went to Beverly Hills High School. We went to high school with, either the sons or daughters of a lot of household names or people who became household names themselves. But, to us, like, I mean, it's funny. Beverly Hills is like a small town in the middle of a big city. If you grew up in a small town in America, it's basically the same thing, except the names are known, but other than that, it really is a small town. And would you say that, growing up with this kind of, in this environment where a lot of people can become jaded or can affect how their view of the world, would you say that growing up in and around this environment helped or hurt you?
I mean, I'm kind of agnostic to both of those, like, to that. I don't know if it helped or hurt. I think I have an awareness about people. I think it's both. I think I think the status aspect of it, I don't like at all. And that's in any city. I mean, you could live in a suburb and have a status aspect to it. I don't like that. I never did. I'm very, I'm not a materialistic person at all. I'm actually the opposite. I'm like super frugal and Depression era style. I must have died from like the plague or something, but I'm very like, just not that way. And that part of it kind of did hurt me because I always felt like there was an aspect to Beverly, just growing up in LA, that's keeping up with the Joneses. And there's no possible way you can keep up with a lot of these Joneses. It's just, you can't. So when you're constantly exposed to that, thinking that that's reality and that's normal and that's attainable without being a Kardashian, it being slightly funny, but like, it's not. It's really not attainable. It's that is like this weird carrot that's dangled over these kids that grew up in Beverly Hills. And unless you have generational wealth, it is really hard to get to the same status as your parents. It just is. So I think in that aspect but I also had 2 parents that their whole life was like this. So mine was kind of like that. So I had this understanding that you can be in a hole, you can be out of the hole, and that's okay too. So I think that was helpful, that I had a good perspective in that way.
Well, let me ask you this. Obviously there's a lot of access that comes along with growing up in Beverly Hills. There's a lot of like, you have probably a list of contacts that's a little more robust and a little bit more impressive than, Joe Blow who grew up, wherever. But aside from that, the access, what would you say is the most positive thing that came out of growing up in this town?
I mean, yeah, like when you grow up with people, right? When you grow up with people that end up becoming successful or whatnot, there's something I don't like, you have a pride about it. Like, oh yeah, I know that guy. Like, I remember when he was like doing this. Like, I remember Spencer Susser was in my photography class. He ended up becoming a very big director. He was also cast in Marty Kellner's Aerosmith video where Eddie Furlong and him like hit the wall. And he was just this brilliant kid, and he was doing stuff in photography class that like no one had seen. And the fact that he went, like, he took his interest and then turned it into like a successful career. Chris Landon, same thing. He was obsessed with B movies. I loved it. He loved horror films. And to see those things happen for people because you actually saw the back half of it, I love it. That's something that I enjoy. I mean, we have a network here that you don't necessarily have when you grow up in other areas. You know,
it's interesting what you said there, because I asked you, how growing up in Beverly Hills either, was a detriment or was, a positive influence on you. And it's interesting because you said it's almost like two halves of the same coin is what you said, is that you said that on one hand, you have to realize that some of this glitz and glamour that you're seeing is not really very attainable or very hard to attain. And it's important to keep a perspective on it. Yet on the other hand, you're saying that you had a lot of people that you knew that went on to, really big success, and what an inspiration that was to you. So it's just kind of an interesting, it's like two halves of the same coin is the way I look at it. It's kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, there for sure, there's kids in look, there's a bunch of people that we grew up with that I think the complete opposite, because I'm like, wow, you're living in a $2 million house that your parents bought. You know what I mean?
No, I'm not going down that. I'm not going down that road with you. I'm just, I'm actually just trying to wrap it up with a kind of a pretty bow, which is what I think, that it was, we didn't plan this out or anything. I just asked you to tell me, what you thought the most negative or positive, negative thing and positive thing were. And to me, it just seemed like the same side of the same, two sides of the same coin, which I thought was interesting.
It's true.
So it was been awesome talking with you.
I know.
I think we know you a lot better than we did at the beginning of the show here. And, I'm looking forward to doing a lot more shows with you, bringing on people that we've grown up with or we've met who either grew up, in the industry or grew up in LA and around LA, but went on to success of their own. It's, I think people will be interested in, these are household names. These are people that people know, but they're just normal people that you and I grew up with. And I'm excited to kind of share what that experience was for us and for them with the people who take the time to listen to our podcast.
Yes, indeed. And you can catch me on AMP too. Tuesdays
for
and
sure.
Thursdays at 10
Yes.
a.m.
For your listening pleasure.
Yeah. Maybe we'll take this show on the road and we'll put it on AMP too.
I like it. I like it.
Awesome. All right. Well, until next time, we're going to figure out and solidify who our guest is, and we'll keep you posted.
Right on. Thanks, Jessica.
All right. Bye.